Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African American owned broadcasting studio. We believe digital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. On We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South, down in Mississippi, where I like to say that the air is just a little bit cleaner and the grass is just a little bit greener. In Mississippi, a state with a tremendous history. Not all of the history we are not proud of, but we have history after all. We have less than 3 million people in the state of Mississippi. You know, they got twice that many people in Chicago, Illinois. And so I can drive for days and days and days and not see another person in Mississippi. We have the best lakes and streams for fishing and hunting. Well, this is a garden spot, blessed with a great climate. You know, Interstate I-55 and Interstate I-20 intersect in Jackson, Mississippi. We should be a transportation hub for the entire region. You know, the mighty Pearl River runs down through the banks of Mississippi. You know, over in Oklahoma City, they have to dig a ditch to try to get some water downtown Oklahoma City. But in Mississippi, we're blessed to have the mighty Pearl running right down through the middle of the city. We haven't done anything with it. We haven't developed it or not, but we should. And I think we will once we change leadership and move Mississippi from last in every category to somewhere in the middle or in the top 10. It can be done. One man can make a tremendous difference. Now, we're struggling right now in Mississippi. Most of you know that we're on the national news every day talking about a water crisis or a lack of competence in African-American leadership. And as this trend continues, then African-Americans will be relegated to the very last position. As my co-host, Dr. Henderson, likes to say, we're last in the pecking order. And he'll explain what he means about that a little bit later on. But this evening, we have a real delight for you. I have an opportunity to introduce to you a gentleman that is a pioneer in his own rights. His story is one that needs to be taught and told in the school systems, in the history books all over this country. A gentleman that made himself by himself. You know, with the help of God and great family and community, he was able to rise above his very humble and meager beginning. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that story this evening. Dr. Chad Cooper is with us. He is a filmmaker. He's a minister. He's a doctor. And he's going to bring some enlightening information to us tonight to make sure that our youth out there know who they are, where they come from, and that they can, in fact, overcome any obstacles. Now, my co-host, as always, is the good Dr. Eldridge Henderson. He's the most sought-after speaker that we have in Jackson, Mississippi. He's sought to speak in your churches, your schools, your organizations. If you need someone that is tremendously intelligent, not only is he intelligent, but he's also street smart. He's a gentleman that has survived everything that the world in Mississippi has thrown at him. Having been born on a plantation in the Mississippi Delta, to sit on this podcast and reaching out all across the world is a tremendous distance between those dashes. You know, Booker T. Washington said, let your buckets down where you are. Du Bois said, give me your talented tenth. But now Booker T said, it's not the heights that you obtain, but the depths from which you came. If that be true, Dr. Henderson would be president of the United States, of this great country, based upon the distance that he has come from his humble beginning. Now, we're going to get right into our show, and those of you that are watching us out there on Facebook, we want you to share this program with your friends and families and send us some stars. Help us finance this great work that we're doing. If you're watching us on YouTube, go on and subscribe to the program on YouTube. It's tremendously important to you. We're growing on YouTube each and every day. If you're watching us on Roku TV, share this with your friends and family. But if you're watching on us at our very own website, WeBelieveDigital.com, our very own platform that one day will be in the same rankings with Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and the rest of social media platforms, we will be there as well because we're unique. We do things uniquely different. For example, our website will give you 8 to 10 categories that you can choose where you want to watch intelligent programs. Great content is housed right there on our platform. Under the category of inspiration, for example, you can go over there and choose inspiration and go down and choose Bishop Ronnie Crudup out of New Horizon Church. And you can watch his entire playlist, if you like, all 80 to 90 videos that he has housed there already. But you may want to watch Pastor Dwayne Pickett at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. With We Believe Digital, you can toggle over and watch Pastor Pickett at 8 o'clock. You see, at We Believe Digital, we can have 10 to 20 churches going live at 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. Whereas most of your major networks, you either got to watch Osteen at 8 and one other program that'll come on at 9. Now, I noticed the other day that streaming services were beginning to show that you can watch 4 or 5 programs live. They got that from us. We started that. We were the first streaming service that was streaming multiple programs at the same time that you can enjoy. Mississippi has a history of bringing talent to the marketplace, and tonight is no different. But I'm going to turn now to that distinguished gentleman, Dr. Eldridge Henderson, and I'm going to ask him to bring information to us in his own way and tell me, where have you been? It's been a while since I've seen you, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Socrates. I've been in Mississippi and other places, been to the doctor's office, had to talk to 2 or 3 politicians last week. And today we had a great gathering at the JSUE Center, where we talked to one of the ambassadors from Africa and some other important people. We had a lot of non-politicians in the office. We believe that we have to create new leaders in Mississippi. And when I say new leaders, I'm talking about new religious leaders, new politicians that we train in our churches, because the schools are not designed to train black leaders. They have been dictated to by the state and the Board of Education, and they are excluded from real history. They want fake history. They want rumors and so forth, and that will lead our people, especially the black young people, to a center of no return because they don't have any past to talk about. It is against the law for Mississippi kids to learn about their history. Now, this is a fact. This is not just something I'm saying. So at that rate, Mr. Socrates, since we were outside of the pecking order, starting a few years ago, in 1960, I told you that we were number 2 in the political, economic, social, and religious pecking order. You had black people that were called upon all over the nation to get on TV, ABC, NBC, and others. You had major black preachers in the early 1960s to talk about black issues. But now black people are not in style. We have fallen from number 2 to number 9. Every group in America, from the Europeans, the Jews, the Arabs, Hispanics, Native Americans, the so-called LBGT community, Black Lives Matter, are all ahead of black folks. There's nothing significant about black people in America, according to the scheme of things that were generated several hundreds of years, 700, Mr. Socrates. Even though we were here before slavery, after slavery, we still don't get any respect. That's why we're here today.
Well, Dr. Henderson, you inform us that our condition is one that is deteriorating. I agree with you that we own a lot more land than we own today, and we had a great family structure that we no longer have in this country. But there is something that you always coin is that there's a new man. Man that was created, that doesn't know where he came from, doesn't know anything about his origin, and so he has nothing to reach back and pull on. So what do you mean when you say we have a new man?
Well, it's bad news, but the fact is, the new man that I talk about was the so-called black man that was created when they had slavery in America. They stripped the black man of everything, religion, economic knowledge. He'd had nothing to be considered culturally. He was not even considered a human being in America. During slavery, he was worse than chattel. He was abused and accused, raped, murdered. The dogs would chase him when he would try to escape and become a free human being. He would be caught and captured, punished, burned, pulled apart, put 2 horses on his right, 2 on his left, and pull him apart with the other slaves looking and listening. And that was the new man. So therefore, he learned to hate himself, Mr. Socrates, Mr. Cooper. He learned to hate his family. He learned to hate God in many instances because he prayed to die. He wouldn't even be allowed to die. He suffered. And the remnants are here today doing the same thing, and that's why we have chaos if we don't solve this problem in the next 7 years. At least get some things done where we can control 5 areas of activity.
Well, Dr. Henderson, we're going to work at solving this problem because as elders, James Meredith, a good friend of yours, said the secret and the solution to this is that we got to turn back to our elders. We got to get some good, solid advice. We got to wind the clock back. We got to put the black man back in the position and in the place there where he belongs. And so we're definitely going to offer up solutions. But I want to turn to our distinguished guest this evening. Dr. Henderson and I always talk about the condition of the African American because it's tremendously important to us. We do this work not because we're paid. We do this work because we believe that we can make a difference and we can shed some light on the condition of African Americans. But we also have to shed light upon those that have overcome and achieved against all odds and have risen to positions that all people can envy. And I see my guest tonight, Dr. Chad Cooper, as an inspiration based upon his story. So I want him to take some time and share with our viewers all over the world. We've been seen in 139 countries and more. Share with our viewers all over the world, what was it like as a boy and how in the world did you get to the position you're in today? Share with us, please, sir.
Well, thank you, Brother Socrates and Dr. Henderson. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, men that are fighting for us, using accoutrements by us to make a difference. And that's a great question. Well, first of all, my name is Chad Lawson Cooper. I'm New York based. I am a movie producer, a playwright, as well as an actor. And I've been touring with a play that's also a movie entitled Justice on Trial. And as I dialogued with you all yesterday, I've not always lived in New York. I grew up in a small town city, with some would say, right outside of Tallahassee, and the name of it was Quincy, Florida. Now, this city would probably remind you of Mayberry, if you can familiarize yourself with that show. I had very little, I'll say, tangible mentors in that city to look at and say, I want to be like that. So TV became an instrument to me to look outside of the box. I did have an uncle who had moved from Quincy to Rochester, New York, that would come home every year, and he had opened up his trucking business in Rochester, and after a few years, Black Enterprise did an article on him on up-and-coming businesses, and he was making about $2.7 million back then, and this has been well over 35 years ago. And he was that one tangible person that I would see about once a year. And he wore a cowboy hat. He wore his boots. He was always polished. And I looked so very much with excitement to see him every year. And so as time went on, the spiritual side of me, I've been in the church world. I grew up in the church, so that was a part of my upbringing. Always believed in God. Started playing the piano, singing at the age of 5. So after that matriculation, I was raised by a single mother who was 42 years older than me, and our average income was about $500 a month. So by the time you buy food, you pay your electric bill and appliances and all of that, to go to McDonald's or to go to Hardee's was a treat on a Sunday after service. Like, wow, we got to wait to the first of the month. So at the age of 16, I ended up dropping out of school. And I figured that I could work, be industrious at the same time, and help my mother and not live in that bubble of $500 a month. So I started working at McDonald's from 5 a.m. to 12 noon. And I don't know how I came up with the epiphany to start an exterminating company. But I started my own exterminating company entitled Dr. Bugs. I Googled a guy by the name of John Dukes out of Gainesville, Florida, who had the company Dr. Bugs, and I called him up at 16 and asked him if I could franchise his business. And he allowed this 16-year-old high school dropout to franchise his business. So my mother may have not had a lot of money at the time, but she had good credit. So we were able to get a truck. We got the B&G sprayers, the uniforms, all that we needed to be able to make this happen. In my first year going from door to door, I did $35,000. And I still had my job at McDonald's as a base. So that took us to a whole different stratosphere from the $500 a month that she was, bringing in through SSI and Social Security. And time went on. About 2 years of doing that, my mother went to get an oil change at one of those 10-minute oil places, parked the car a little bit above the hole that you park over, and walked in the back of the car and fell down that 10-foot drop and broke her hip.
Wow.
So then we had to find an attorney to take her case. And I walked into this white guy's office by the name of Richmond. And I don't know what it was, but he said to me, I see something in you. He said, "What do you do?" I told him, my situation. He said, "If you go back to school and get your GED and go back to school, I'll pay for you to go to school, and you can come and work for me." And in a matter of a couple of months, I got my GED. I went back to him. He did not hire me at once, though. I volunteered for 6 months. And but I was going everywhere he was going, driving him around, being at all of the meetings. And I felt that just being in the atmosphere was a form of school for me, because I was learning things that I'd never seen before, going places I'd never been before. And after 6 months, true enough, he hired me and gave me money for tuition.
Wow.
And that's how I got back in school. And in that same year.
Hold your point right there. I certainly want to continue to share this story. I think it's tremendously important. Chad has said what a humble beginning he comes from, and he's beginning to tell us how he's getting on the right path. And there's so much more of this story that we're going to enjoy this evening. But we're getting ready to go to a station break in a few minutes. And Dr. Henderson, very briefly, we have about 30 seconds before we go to station break. When I come back, I want you to explain to me how children that have less seem to do better than those that are privileged in society today. And I don't know what that's all about, but I'm hearing all too often that our children that we've given everything to are not doing as well as they should. So when we come back, I want you to address that for me. Now, you're watching Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting right here from Jackson, Mississippi, in an African-American owned and operated broadcast studio. Also, you're listening to us on our very own internet radio station. So we're going to go to a commercial break, and we'll be right back after this message.
With so much going on day to day, we lose track of what's important. Sometimes we get lost, we lose ourselves, and we forget that our personal care is important. Self-care is checking in on our physical and mental health and making sure we are using and putting good things into our bodies. It's when we take time, real time, to connect ourselves back to a beautiful, healthier, happier you. Join me and an expert lineup of speakers on April 1st as we teach you the real meaning of self-care. This will be an empowering and enlightening time to help you get and stay in tune with yourself. Invite a friend, invest in yourself, and let's all learn the true meaning of self-care. You need it, you deserve it. I can't wait to see you transform from the inside out.
Have you had your Earthblend coffee today? At Earthblend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world of one cup with Earthblend. To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Looking for the hottest content in the city of Jackson and surrounding areas? Check out WeBelieveDigital.com. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. We Believe Digital Podcast is here for all your podcasting needs.
Well, welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're having a great conversation with two distinguished gentlemen, but our time is short, so I'm going to get right into the program. Dr. Henderson, I was asking, how is it true that African-American children that given many things in life that you and I did not have are not doing as well as children that come from a meager, more humble beginning? Is it any paradox in that situation, or what's going on?
Well, it's very clear, and I can tell you, since I'm a living proof, that you can start off at the bottom of the barrel and don't even have a bucket that doesn't have a hole in it. Now, I did have a bucket, but it had a hole in it, and every time I thought I would get something, it had disappeared. Because I started on that plantation when I had noticed around 3 years old. I noticed something wasn't right in the family. I very seldom saw my father. I saw him on weekends. He would get up every morning at 4 a.m., tell my mother to get up. She cooked a hot breakfast every day, 7 days a week. We got up when we started smelling that bacon, that honey, we called it molasses during that time, and that coffee. But we didn't drink coffee. We were told that coffee make you black. And when I was born in the 1940s, they didn't know black person wanted to be black. And my parents laughed about it. 30 years later, they say, well, we couldn't afford but 2 coffee drinkers in the house. And we told you all to get black if you drink coffee, only because we couldn't afford to give you any. But
I had heard that as a child, if you drink coffee, it'll make you black.
That's right.
And you said nobody wanted to be
No,
black.
we didn't want to be black.
Wow.
You know, we were colored then.
Yes.
We were colored. So at that rate, when I turned 5 years of age, I started working full-time on the plantation.
5 years old.
That's right. When I turned 6, I started to school. Now imagine at 5 years old, I would get up, we will milk the cows, feed the pigs, put wood in the kitchen and on the front porch. Then when I turned 6, I would do the same thing and start walking to school about 6:30 because we had to walk 5 miles to school. School bus passed us every day. Never had a ride to school for 8 years because my father got up and worked all the time. And he never had a car that was reliable. It might get to work and might not. But he had a lot of friends that would pick him up on the side of the road to get him away. He always worked. Then when I finished 8th grade, after walking to school for 8 years, I had planned to quit. This is a true story. The plantation owner offered me a job, a full-time job, to fix fences, bale hay, and do anything else he told us to do. Going to give me $2 a day. I had my own house picked out. They give you a house on the plantation. It was free. And he said, after a while, with my $2 a day, I could go down to Raymond, Mississippi, and pick out any used car I want and pay for it out of my $2 a day. And that's what I plan to do. And for some reason, the supervisors in Hinds County opened up a black high school in Clinton, Mississippi for black students. We were so poor, we couldn't go to Jackson to go to public schools. So my career was done at 8th grade. And when they opened the school, my dad and mom said, boy, you got to go to school. You're not going to have that job. And that hurt my heart because I missed my used car. I didn't want to do it. And the last thing...
You missed your job on the plantation as well. You had full employment, I guess.
Because that was guaranteed. See, I had food, clothing, and shelter. And if you got real sick and didn't die, they would take you to the doctor. And the landlord would take care of that bill.
Wow.
So we were in heaven, I thought. That's my life for the first 17 years.
Well, Doc, many slaves were freed and returned to the plantation. Now, you didn't.
No, I didn't.
You didn't, but many slaves experienced freedom and returned to the plantation. Why is that?
Well, it was because of their tradition, their culture. They look at their parents, their grandparents. My parents always wanted to do better. They always wanted to do better. My dad wasn't a church man, but he would take us to church every Sunday and leave and go somewhere, drop the kids off in Mom, and Mom would always make us participate in church, sing in the choir, do a little speech at every holiday, Easter and so forth, do a little prayer. They had me up there praying, reading the Bible, quoting a verse. And then my dad believed in something that I didn't like, because I was doing too much of it, and it was hard work. Mom keeping me focused. Dad said, you got to work, boy. You can't end up like me on this plantation. You got to do something. And if I would act like I didn't want to work, he had something called chastisement. He'd put that belt off and get on me, and I start working and trying to do better. And I say, I will not live on this plantation anymore. So I finished high school and went to junior college. That same plantation that I was born on, later on, I bought part of it myself.
Look out now.
That's awesome.
Look out, Doc.
That's right.
Look out.
Awesome.
Now, Doc, we're going to come back to you, but I didn't quite get what I wanted in terms of why African Americans recently freed would return to the plantation. But
I have the answer for it when you get back to it.
When I get back to you, I want to know why that is, because I think in our discussions, a broken man with no country, no family, that's been completely divided and no heritage inside of his body, doesn't have anywhere to go, with no land, no relatives, the role models, etc. And so you get that kind of behavior. But we're glad that you got off that plantation, and we're glad that you are Dr. Eldridge Henderson sitting here today.
Yes.
It's a mighty statement to make that you're able to do that. And we want our children and we want our community to know that regardless of what obstacles you face, there is a way out of it. And what I gleaned from Dr. Henderson then, there were two motivating things that created the man that you have now. One was that belt, that strap that his daddy put on his behind when he didn't work as hard as he thought he should have been, and a nurturing mama that focused him on the social skills in life and made him say speeches in the church house and made him read and get up in front of the public. And so those two things there, we got to come back to and see if that's what's happening in our communities today. But I was enjoying so much, Dr. Cooper. You had began to tell us a little bit about your return to work for the gentleman that encouraged you to go back and get a GED. Now here you are too, a successful African American, and I'm learning that you had to drop out of high school.
Yes.
You had to get a job to try to improve the financial condition with a single mom and $500 a month, and that just wasn't going to work.
Yes.
And you got your GED, and you went back and started a new career. Continue for us.
Well, the year that my class was graduating, which was 1989, it was the last year that I was working at McDonald's and doing the exterminating before I transitioned over to Attorney Richmond. My whole class walked in McDonald's that morning, and I had just carried a bucket of ice and dumped it into the ice bin and turned around, and they were standing there getting ready to go on the class trip. And I felt this small. And I said, oh, my God.
I made a mistake.
Yeah, well, I felt that way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I had to sway my shoulders and rise above it. And many times it's not where we are, but we got to stay focused on where we're going, because everybody's life has a different trajectory, and sometimes God uses detours to get us to our destination. And mine was a detour, so I started volunteering with Mr. Richmond because he didn't really hire me at first. But he said he would, but he gave me access to him. And sometimes we have to value access in places that we wouldn't normally get access to get the information that we need to better ourselves. It was the first time I flew on a private plane. While I was volunteering for him, he took the office to Atlantic City. We flew on a private plane and we sat down, and it was 4 of us in Atlantic City, and the dinner was like $1,800. And I was like, my God, I had a suite that was out of this world. And I was like, is this for real? Yes, it's for real. But even then, I had the mentality of, I want to be able to do this for myself. And so I was gathering information then. And even when I started working for him and was getting paid, I started my own consulting business. I became a political consultant in that town. And so I was doing the sheriff, because then I had access. He was the county attorney. So I had access to politicians. So I'm running the sheriff's campaign. Mm-hmm. And I remember before my mother got this $400,000 lawsuit, my bank account at Capital City Bank was overdrawn $100. This white guy, Herschel, president of the bank, would call me every day about that $100. When we got that settlement, I took $100,000 in paper money into his bank with $100 worth of pennies. And I said, I'd like to see Herschel. We walked into his office. I said, here's your $100 in pennies. He said to me, I don't care how much money you and your mama got. Get out of my bank. So I've always been kind of a rebel in that sense. But years went on. I went to Springfield College and graduated with a bachelor's degree, and then went back and got my doctorate degree. And then from there, I went also, while I was at Springfield, I also was at FAMU. So, because I wanted the HBCU experience, which literally changed my life, because I saw other black people that were my age and those that were even older as the professors doing something that was so positive, different. I think it's a different world was on at the time. And we need shows like that to encourage us. And then from there, I ended up pastoring for a while. And I got kind of bored pastoring, because it was every Easter it's the same message. And for me, not saying that if that's what you're supposed to do, you do that. But for me, I felt like it's got to be more to this. and as we had moved to Miami, Florida, I would act as a visiting professor at Florida Memorial University, which is the home of the Black National Anthem. And my wife worked there in administration, and she dragged me to a play one night. Now, I didn't care for plays like that. I mean, if I went, I only went to one at FAMU, and from a patron standpoint, I was like, hey, I can do that. I can get on the stage and sing and do. That's the extent of it. But that night, as we were chaperoning those students, the Lord spoke to me and said, you're going to do plays and movies, and you're going to travel the world. And one thing with me, three things that make me cry. That's when I'm in a situation where I feel like I'm being attacked, and I cannot fight back. I'm going to have some issues there, and so I'll cry if I can't retaliate, or if something is happening to my family and I have no control of it, that will bring me to tears. My wife, my children, my mother, or when God is speaking to me. So God spoke to me that day and said to me, this is what you're going to do. God doesn't have to speak to me twice for me to get the message. I got it, and I moved forward into writing the first play, which was a play called Church Mess. And Church Mess, we toured in well over 100 in some of our cities across the country. Don't ask me how we did it, because I don't know. When I look back, how in the world that we tour in over 170 cities across the country with very little resources at first. And over 10 years, a 10-year span, we did it. Got tired of that. Went to another production called Family Mess. Did that for 3 years. Then here comes 2015. My wife and I are going through some issues. We end up separating for a year. While we were separated, I lose everything that I have. I have 2 cars left. She has one, I have one. She's staying with her sister and mother in Maryland in a nice mansion, and I'm sleeping in my car and staying on friends' floors. This big time guy that was traveling around the country, and many of the frenemies and haters would say, "Oh yeah, oh my, how the mighty has fallen." But here's the thing: when God has a purpose in your life, I don't care what happens. If things haven't worked out yet, because in the end things will work out. If things haven't worked out yet, that means it's not the end. God was taking me through an experience. I had no idea it was at that space, staying on a friend's floor on an air mattress in the projects in Wilmington, Delaware. It's when God gave me Justice on Trial. And it was a 6 months process as I would write it and come up with these different concepts. Like I was living it. It was almost like Ray Charles in that scene where he was on drugs. I wasn't on drugs, but I was going through depression while I was writing this. And when the final piece came out, I used whatever resources that I had, and we started casting right there in Wilmington, Delaware. Brought it back to New York, rehearsed, 6 months of rehearsal. Booked the Medgar Evers University Auditorium, and we put on that play to a packed out audience. And I knew the content of this play was controversial. I did not know, because New York is the hardest place to break in a production. Did not know how the audience would feel, because it's not a gospel play. It's a flat out social justice, urban theater play at its best. And when the audience responded in New York, when they were cussing back at the attorney for the U.S. Justice Department, I said, "This is good. This is good." When the jury deliberation, when the white lady or the jury told the black lady, and they're discussing, "Well, why in the world y'all worried about something that happened 200 years ago?" And the black lady say, "What do you mean happened 200 years ago? It started 200 years ago, and it's still whappening today." She said, "Well, why are you even talking to me? If I want you, I'll send for you. You're going to learn how to talk to a white woman in New York City today." And the black woman saying, "Doggone it, you're going to learn how to talk to a black woman in New York City today. Let's get this record straight." And so it breaks down black history during the jury deliberation. We talk about voter issues. We talk about systemic racism. We talk about the value of how many years black people were enslaved, and Jim Crow laws, and what that would equate as far as economic wise, even on the low end of the spectrum of $14 trillion. It should be really more like $50 trillion. So all of this is being displayed, and did not know God was setting me up for a comeback. So that play took me out of poverty. And we did it in New York consistently for 2 years, and then 2018 we go on tour.
Hold your point right there. We're getting ready to go to a station break. Tremendous conversations that we're having here this evening, and you're only going to get this kind of content at We Believe Digital, where African Americans are controlling the narrative and not letting anyone else tell our story. This story would never be heard in Mississippi if the black community does not bring it to bear. We're going to continue this when we come back, so stay tuned, and we'll be back right after this commercial.
Socrates Garrett, NT.com is a diversified firm specializing in recycled aggregates and crushed concrete. Socrates Garrett ENT.com's recycled materials provide the construction industry with significant economic and environmental benefits by recycling clean concrete rubble into MDOT grade rock materials. Recycled aggregates and crushed concrete can be applied to driveways, road construction, bank protection, parking lots, general bulk fills, and more. For more information, please call 601-896-0084 or visit us online at SocratesGarrettENT.com.
The Mississippi Link is an African-American female-owned newspaper with a trusted voice that is highly respected throughout the city, state, and nation. Our motto, Keepers of the Knowledge for People Who Speak the Truth, since 1993. Link significantly influences the thoughts, attitudes, and buying decisions of its readers. Call us at 601-368-8481 for your advertising needs. If you would like to receive a newspaper in the mail each week, our annual subscription is only $52 per year. That is only $1 per week for you to stay informed regarding many stories that you can only get in the Mississippi Link. Sign up today at themississippilink.com and click on Home Delivery.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi. That's right, in Jackson, Mississippi, a state with a rich history, a state that you would have to visit to understand the complexity of it. You know, at one point in time, there were more African Americans in Mississippi than there were Europeans. That's right. There were more African Americans in Mississippi than Europeans. My co-host, Dr. Eldridge Henderson, had said that slavery could have been ended in 60 days if blacks had decided and come together and just refused to take it anymore, like the American Indian. But I'm glad that they didn't get to be like the American Indian, which is no longer can you find them. We marched them off to Oklahoma, and we have a few Indians here in Philadelphia and some other places. But this was the Choctaw Nation of the world. And right now, we don't have any Choctaws. But Dr. Henderson said we could have ended slavery. And when I come back to him, we're going to ask him how in the world could he make such a statement as that. And because slavery is in a different form, but I believe that it is still continuing on today. So we're having these kinds of conversations, and this program is being seen all over the world. Now, you can call in at 800-492-5186 and join us in this last segment of our program. If you're watching us on Facebook, we want you to share this program with your friends and families and send us stars. If you're watching it on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the program. We'd like to get 1 million subscribers. I was admiring and watching Roland Martin on his program on YouTube the other day, and I saw he had some 1.3 million subscribers, and I said, if Roland figured it out, if he found a way, that methodology is available to the rest of us. And while we don't have 1.2 million yet, we're growing every day. So if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe. Now, if you're watching us on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. That's WeBelieveDigital.com. There you'll find many categories of inspiring programs that you can choose to watch from. We have great content, over 5,000 videos in the archives right now. The unique thing about us is on the inspiration category on Sunday mornings, you can hear 5 or 6 different preachers at 8 o'clock in the morning at the same time. You can just toggle back between their own channels and enjoy that message. You don't have to wait for the program to come on as a rerun. You can watch it live right here on WeBelieveDigital.com. We need your support. Now, on the website, there's also a donation button. Go ahead on and hit the donation button. We'd be glad to have you support this program. You know, it's important. We cannot afford nor allow others to tell our story. That's how we got in this mess we're in right now. That's how we don't know who we are. We don't have a rich heritage. We don't know the story of Hannibal. We don't understand our rich history, that civilization began on the banks of the Nile River. We don't understand that the first man born in the Garden of Eden had to be African American. But it's just clear. If you're in Africa and you got that kind of sun beaming down on you every day, you develop certain characteristics like a wide nose to be able to breathe and get air, and pigment in your skin to be able to ward off the rays of sun. It's just things that God put in us that allow us to survive. And we are a majestic people. We have great stories to tell. And I just loved listening to our guest, Dr. Chad Cooper, here today. And I want your children to hear these stories as well. You know, we go back and we pay tribute to Marcus Garvey, who is probably one of my favorite characters, and Reginald Lewis with Beatrice Foods, brothers that have done remarkable things. And so we know that these stories have to be told. But today, this evening, we have an opportunity to listen to a person who is alive and kicking. His dad is 98 years old, and I want him to talk about him briefly. And he was born on a plantation and knows more things. You know, one thing he told me that I can't figure out how that happened. And he told me that he watched black men tell you how to drill for water, where to dig wells, that they had a scientific approach to it. Back in the early days, and I don't know how you would not have any education but could tell someone where to drill a well. Black folk are amazing people with a wonderful, rich heritage. And so we're going to continue in our program. Dr. Henderson.
Yes, sir.
How did those people know where to drill water, or were you just pulling my leg?
No, it's true. I used to see it. I would walk around with my grandfather. My grandfather was what we call the plantation handyman. He built chimneys. He dug wells. That means he found the water before he dug the well. He was the carpenter and only went to the 3rd grade. But he didn't learn anything because he didn't get books until he was in the 3rd grade, and he dropped out of school at the end of that first 3rd grade year. So as a well digger, he couldn't afford to not find water every time because he only got $3 per well. So my grandfather would get a stick, like a chicken wishbone, and he would walk around in the area where they told him they wanted some water. And eventually that stick would start doing this, pointing down. He said, "There it is, boy, there it is. Y'all get in there and start digging." And every time you go down 10, 15, 30 feet sometime farther, but you always found water. That water popped up. Then he had to go in there and put a covet in there from the top to the bottom of that pit and pull all that little dirty water out of there, and then the next day or two you had clear water.
The stick would start vibrating?
That's right, just like that. And he said, "There it is, there it is. Get to digging, boys."
Wow.
That's a true story. I used to see it.
Wow.
He didn't have enough education to spell water, but he learned it somewhere. Somebody taught it to him.
Supernatural.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So Doc, our guest, Dr. Chad Lawson Cooper, was giving us some wonderful, inspiring words about God having spoken to him at the right time and right place and giving him some instructions on what to do. And I was laughing with you guys off the air, and I told you that as a little boy, my mom and dad would take me and my sister to church, and they would put us up in front, and they would say, "Are you saved? And you're going to stay here till you get it." And he said, "Do you get it yet? Do you have it yet?" And my sister would always say, "Socrates, just say you got it so we can get out of here." But I never did get it, Doc. And so, did you have that experience?
I did, but I was so headstrong, I didn't believe in that stuff. But my mom told me, said, when I passed 13, said, "When you pass 13, your sin's on me. Boy, if you don't get religion this year, when you die, you're going to hell." And I was afraid to go to hell because my parents had a fireplace, and they say, "If you go to hell, son, That's all I can remember at an early age. Hell's fire is 7 times hotter than this fireplace. Put your hand up close, boy. My name was Boy. Put your hand up close, boy. I had to pull it back. I didn't want to go to hell. So at 14, I was looking for the Word. I would go down in the woods every day when I had a chance during prayer meeting. Listen to hear God call my name. I would listen for the angels to call. Never heard them. And that last night, the preacher got close to me because I was only one left and started talking to me. Say the Lord told him certain things. Started shaking my head, almost broke my neck. And I say, I got to call it. And I jumped up, and my grandmother fainted. My grandmother fainted. She fell. I know he got it. I know he got it. Now, that's a true story. And I didn't have nothing.
Yeah, well, you must have had some. You went on to become a minister, didn't you?
Well, I've got another religion later on.
Oh, okay.
So I've had 2 baptisms. I had baptized.
See, so your grandmother fell
She fainted.
because you said you got
She
the
said,
call.
I know he got it. I've been praying for that boy. I know he got it.
Well, Doc, is it true? Now, I gotta say that I believe is some truth in this, that a lot of your success and achievements in the world come from the prayers of your grandmothers.
I believe it. I believe it.
I believe that, you know, a lot of things that we enjoy today, somebody gave a tremendous sacrifice and prayed for you that you would become a good man and be safe here in America.
Right. I believe that 100%. But let's get back to something you asked earlier about why these black folks, after slavery, went back to the plantation.
Yeah, I want to know.
I'm going to tell you right now. 95% of the former slaves in the South went back to the plantation because they had to deal with 8 no's. The day they were free, the plantation owner, in most cases, said, you blacks are free. You got to get out of here before sundown. Imagine. They had no tools, no animals, no money, no transportation, no education, no human rights. There were 8 no's that they didn't have. They didn't even have food. The plantation would let them take food on it. Plantation owner would let them take food. So here, Socrates, his family, my family, leave the plantation. No later than the 2nd and the 3rd day, they start flocking back to the plantation, asking their boss to let them just live back where I used to live. And he was smiling and said, yeah, you can do it. I'm going to be fair to you this time. I'm going to pay you.
I'm not going to beat you as much.
That's right. I'm going to pay you.
So is that where the term sharecropping came from?
That's right. And what we call quasi-legal racism, because the courts, the police, and the plantation owners and the corporate leaders decided to keep blacks enslaved perpetually until the 1960s. And even on that plantation that I was born on, today I still have relatives living on that same plantation. And I know a lot of men my age that never been off that plantation, never attended a military exercise, because the plantation owner was over the draft board. His black boys that was 18 and older didn't have to go to the military, where I was from.
Now, Doc, I believe that the Europeans in Mississippi were different than the Europeans up in Boston and Massachusetts and other places like that. I believe that we had a more difficult situation, were meaner, cruel, and that's why we have such stories like we have with the civil rights workers that were slain in Mississippi, and the Medgar Evers story that we have to talk about, and the Vernon Damer story, and the Fannie Lou Hamer story. I believe there was more cruelty in Mississippi than anywhere else in the world.
I guarantee you, that's right. I'm quite sure that's probably motivated Dr. Cooper to do this movie that he's doing, this play.
Absolutely.
Because he knows from research, this was what I call the pit of hell, Mississippi, Alabama. And Louisiana was number 2, by the way. They treated human beings, animals better than human beings.
Wow.
So the result, though, is amazing. When slavery ended in 1865, in 7 years, all those no's that I mentioned almost disappeared between black folks. During Reconstruction, we had land. In 7 years, more than we have today. We had transportation. We had legal family structures because a lot of the slaves were not legally married. Think about it.
Yeah.
We had trades. Because during this period, during slavery, the blacks and the so-called free Negroes that lived in the same community couldn't communicate. So we were totally uneducated. Couldn't even speak English. We spoke at that time something that they called niggerese. This and that. Made a tater, popcorn, stuff like that. That's the way I used to talk. The preachers talked that way. My parents talked like that. The school teachers talked like that. And we had more economic power in those 7 years than we have today. We had schools, cab companies, transportation companies. We had manufacturing units. We had politicians that were sheriffs, superintendent of education, senators in the House. And those guys, many were former slaves and scalawags that came from the North, the free Negroes, and they got in those positions, started their own schools, own hotels, own health care facilities, including hospitals, and turned into real human beings, and started losing it in 1879. And by 1879 to 1901, we were back into real slavery again. Only 7 years of Reconstruction.
7 years is a magic number. We probably got about 7 minutes. We're going to run a little bit over to the engineers. And we're going to talk a little bit now. I mean, we've got to continue this conversation. Mississippi banned the critical race theory from being taught in our school system, even though Black history wasn't being taught in the first place. And we got to discuss it. And we got to find a way to win and survive and achieve and accomplish regardless of what the situation is. And our guest tonight is a gentleman that is in Jackson, Mississippi, to present a powerful, powerful production. And I want him to tell everybody out there all over the state of Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, you can drive over here. Tell our viewers a little bit about what you have in store for them.
With Justice on Trial, the off-Broadway play deals with two civil rights attorneys suing the U.S. Justice Department for reparations and systemic racism. So there's a civil suit for both. And in this courtroom drama, we bring back time traveler witnesses to testify, or I should say we bring in time traveler witnesses to testify, such as Harriet Tubman, Medgar Evers, Emmett Till, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. And they tell their stories to a multicultural jury, black, whites, and Hispanics. And they deliberate their stories, but they also have a candid discussion about where we are now as a people, because the trial is based in 2023. And so we're able to tie in the then and the now together and have that candid conversation. So it's educational, motivational, inspirational. As Dr. Henderson was saying about the mentality, we deal with mindsets. You can take a person out of the country, as they say, but you can't take the country out of the person. There's a difference in deliverance and healing. Slavery, we may have been delivered from it in a certain aspect, but we've not yet been healed from it. So deliverance is taking you out of that situation, but healing is taking that situation out of you. So if we still have the same mentality, it's just another form of it in a different way. And so we have to change mindsets. And part of that, and what I like about this production, it keeps pounding into the mind as to who we are. Listen, you are not second class. You are first class. Let's go back to our origin. The richest man in the world was King Massa Musa. they equate his wealth up around $6 or $7 trillion.
I always thought it was Solomon. So
No, it was Masa Musa.
Can you hold 1 second? Caller, you're on the air. Go ahead, caller. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Hey guys, this is Tamika. What a great show. I just wanted to let Mr. Garrett and Mr. Henderson know that someone in Georgia asked me about you guys because it's very informative. It shows different generations as you gentlemen are speaking. And so they wanted to know if you guys would be interested in coming here being speakers. So that's really exciting. I just wanted to tell you guys that I'm enjoying the information tonight. And people are asking about you coming to speak to the young ones. That is all.
Thank you so much for calling. We certainly will consider the information, and we'll call you back and get more details later on. But Dr. Henderson is one of the most sought-after speakers in this country. So thanks for calling, and we'll get back and get the details.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a good night, gentlemen.
All right. Bye-bye. Yeah, you said that, we didn't get healed from slavery. How did you say that now?
I said that we got delivered from slavery in a certain aspect of, if you want to call it deliverance on paper, but not deliverance in mentality.
Oh, okay.
But deliverance on paper is saying you're delivered. You're out of this. Nobody is holding you hostage. But if we don't tend to get healing, deliverance is when you're brought out of something, but healing is when that something is brought out of you. And so the issue is we still have very much in the black community that same mentality. We'll believe a white man before we believe a black man. T.D. Jakes, just using him metaphorically, can say, God is good. Get up and go to work, and God's going to bless you. You work, you eat. I ain't listening to him. Joel Osteen can come on and say, get up and go to work. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. And God's going to bless you. And, I just really, Joel Osteen, it's that mentality because we've been taught how to disrespect and disvalue our own.
Right.
And even within our own race, we have colorism issues. If you're really dark skinned, many people that are dark skinned, when you hear people say, "Well, you're a pretty dark skinned woman," well, what does that mean? You're pretty. So if you're a dark skinned woman, you're second class to a light skinned woman. And there's nothing more beautiful than a chocolate woman that has beautiful features, just as I've seen many light-skinned women that don't have good features.
Well, the old saying that black don't crack is out there as well. Now, we're getting close to the end of our time this evening, and so, Dr. Cooper, when is the event, where is it located, and how does one acquire tickets?
Great question. The event is May the 13th, that's a Saturday, at Jackson State University at the Rose McCoy Auditorium. One can acquire discounted tickets by calling 212-786-6460. That's 212-786-6460, or visiting us online at the Chad Cooper Company on Broadway.com as well to secure your discounted tickets. And we're also seeking for some sponsors to sponsor some of the youth in the Jackson area. Is who I really want to come and be able to experience this, because in a normal situation they may not ever get a chance to do it. So we're asking some people to sponsor 25 tickets, 50 tickets, maybe 100 tickets. We do have one sponsor so far, Tony Gines has sponsored 100 underprivileged students, and we're asking those that can and will invest in the youth as we continue to tell our story, teaching our young people and our people in general that we were not slaves brought over here, but we were kings and queens brought over here, made to be slaves. So know who you are.
Well, you heard it here on We Believe Digital. We are going to ask Dr. Henderson to give his closing remarks, and we'll come back one last round with Dr. Cooper, and then we're going to say goodnight. Dr. Henderson.
Thank you. Well, I don't want to tell you, Mr. Socrates, Dr. Cooper is a man among men. He is like a few other black people that I've known that would not let his circumstances determine his future. He didn't like his upbringing, and he did something about it. Even though he thought he was in a bad situation, but his mind didn't think that. And I'm not going to go back through his story, but anyone that's born poor or poor, there's a difference in poor and poor.
Yeah.
He was born poor. I was born poor, P-O. And we learned how to maneuver that system and get out of it.
Yes, yes.
And we declared, I know I did, I would never be poor again. If there are $3 in America, I'm going to get one of them, one way or the other.
That's it. Mm-hmm.
And I bet he has a similar idea. So my goal for others is to help them believe that they can change their lives in 36 to 90 days regardless.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Cooper.
Well, you're very welcome. I got one more thing to say. Many a times, as talented as we are, as black people, we're waiting on a seat at the table. And a lot of times we're not invited to the table. My answer to that is, if you're not invited to the table, but you got all the ingredients that make the table, stop looking for an invite to the table and just become the table yourself.
Wow, you heard it here. You've been watching Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting right here from Jackson, Mississippi. We've had a wonderful program this evening, but you can go back and watch this program anytime you feel like. It'll be archived there on our website under Hot Topics, Socrates Garrett Live. And you can watch this show as many times as you want to, as often as you want to, and your great-great-grandchildren will be able to see it. Until next week, we want you to stay safe and good night. Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett.